The long-awaited Ukrainian counteroffensive is finally here, or at least they say so. But Zelensky confirmed that they've started sending the tanks in to kick the Russians out and so on. And I kind of wanted to go through what's happening, because you need to understand that the Russians, they've been building hundreds of kilometers, of positions, of trenches, of tank traps. And usually what they'll do, I'm generalizing here, but what they'll do is they'll have these tank traps. It's basically like a trench, but so wide that not only could you fit a couple of human beings in there, but an entire tank would just fall in, right? This tank trap, it's so wide that any tank that actually drives there is going to fall in. Many tanks that can cross tiny gaps, but maybe a few meters wide, but they can't go this wide. So the Russians, they start with building these massive lines for the tanks to fall inside, okay? And then after that, what you'll have are these basically they call them dragon's teeth. It's a bunch of white concrete slabs that block any tank from moving through. So even if hypothetically that whatever tank you have would get past the first line of defense, they would still have to negotiate these concrete slabs of obstacles in their face, right? So you can see some of them on the screen here. So this is what the concrete dragon's teeth look like. Okay, so this is obviously a bit simpler, but they'll have them positioned in multiple rows so you can't get through. Okay, that's the entire point. Then the third line of defense, you can see in these satellite photos, these zigzags down here. You see those? These are trenches for human beings this time, okay, not for tanks to fall in, but these are the just your regular trenches, and the third line of defense. Okay, so you need to understand all of this, because the Russians have been from the better part of a year just building a massive line, and which of course includes all the areas here, so everything behind in red, okay? You can see this line going around like that. Now, what have the Ukrainians been able to capture? I mean, not much, very, very little. They've taken some villages, but I'm being very, very generous here, because actually they've sent in their tanks and they've been completely devoured. That doesn't mean the Russians haven't taken losses, because you can bet they're taking losses too. But these tanks have been hyped up, right? They've been saying, oh, we're going to send them the Challenger 2s, which are the British tanks with depleted uranium, right? And the Leopard, which are the German tanks, and they also gave them some even older ones. And then they've got some Bradleys, which are not the highly coveted American M1 Abrams, but M1A2 Abrams, but they'll get there someday. You remember when we were talking about the Americans sending in Abrams? What they did is basically they tricked the Germans and British into sending their own tanks, and then gave the impression that you would have M1 Abrams coming as well with the Challengers, but it was just a trick, right? Like a typical Uncle Sam lawyer type. We'll send them, but at some point, not right now. They just forgot to mention that. In any case, here I'll show you a couple of videos, okay? So these are purported to be or this is rather purported to be a column of Ukrainian tanks getting ready to go in. Okay, there's a lot of videos here, right? These are just Russian drones, basically. You can see them filming themselves going in for the nosedive. I mean, you can't see anything on this video. You can't see anything on this, but it's basically thermal vision at night. And the You see those things glowing in the middle? That's a column of armored vehicles. There we go. Now that's the projectile, and yeah, it's hitting the armor. Okay, so these are being fired from helicopters, from Russian helicopters. Basically, by the way, what happens is the Ukrainians will hit some Russian vehicle and then publish the video through the Ministry of Defense, and the Russians will do the same thing every day. You know, this is a video published by Ukraine where they're hitting a Russian tank. Well, that one's already hit. You know, what you're seeing is, yeah, okay, there you go. The ammunition, yeah. So they'll hit the tank, and sometimes the rounds, the shells, the fuel that's being carried in the tank will also catch fire and then explode, and the turret will pop off. The turret is the gun that sits on top, which moves. So, you know, when that happens, you'll know it, and effectively the ammunition's blown up there. What the Russians are saying is that the Ukrainians are sending in these like suicidal columns of tanks that are really just, they're trying to test the Russian defenses and break through so that others can follow. But you know, for the poor guys that are driving the tanks in the front, that are driving that initial column, well, you know, it's not nice. You see that in the middle? So what you're watching, these are the gun sights. Okay. There you have two APCs. APC is an armored personnel carrier, so it's some of them have turrets, meaning guns, and basically you'll have a cannon on top and some machine guns, maybe one in the front and on the sides. Not all of them, but you'll have several people, like, you know, more than 3 or 4 that drive a tank. 10 men inside of an APC. So when you hit an APC, you know, it will incur far more casualties. And like I said, I mean, this whole thing's so sad and could have been avoided. But here's Blinken saying that the Russians are going to lose, and because of this counteroffensive.
Ukraine's success in the counteroffensive would do 2 things. It would strengthen its position at any negotiating table that emerges, and it may have the effect as well of actually causing Putin to finally focus on negotiating an end to the war that he started. And in that sense, it can actually bring peace closer, not put it further away. Ukraine's success in the...
You know, this guy is really funny because he says things that have no basis in reality. You know, there is a table, a negotiating table that Ukraine can come to at any time, but because Boris Johnson, you know, the former prime minister, went to Zelensky and told him, pull out, don't engage in any peace talks with the Russians. We will back you, we will help you, etc., etc. That's almost a year ago. Almost, not quite, but almost a year ago. What good has that done Ukraine, or Russia for that matter, or the rest of the world? You know, it's only been escalation after escalation. So Blinken, unfortunately, has, you know, some form of demented thinking that goes back many administrations. You know, it's kind of like the Nixon, the Dick Nixon and Henry Kissinger mantra. You know, bomb them to the negotiating table. This is when you have you've reached peak diplomatic status, when your mind is so in tune with peace and diplomacy that you bomb someone into negotiating with you. So you had missions like Linebacker 1 and Linebacker 2 in Vietnam, where, you know, well, it wasn't really Vietnam only, was it? It's Cambodia and Laos too. But anyway, the idea in those missions was you send B-52. The B-52 is the and still is the main bomber, right, that the Americans have. In World War II, they had B-17, and then that was, scrapped and, well, it became outdated. And they had the B-52, and it's so good they've kept it ever since. And they give them maintenance and so on. But back then, you know, a B-52, is carrying traditional ordnance, so traditional bombs, and they can also carry nuclear bombs. But even without a nuclear bomb, let's say it's just a conventional, a bomb and ordnance that they drop from the aircraft. It's non-nuclear, okay? You need to understand that these are carpet bombers. These planes, it's like they spit bombs, right? They don't just drop one object. They carpet bomb, hence the term carpet bomb the place. Now, they would send one after the other after the other. They're literally in a line, these planes. So they flattened the place. So this thinking that Blinken has, it's, obviously no one is, I'm not comparing these, these Ukrainian counteroffensive or counteroffensives to linebacker. It's a completely different beast. But the thinking behind Blinken's sentence is kind of the same. It's, I'm not going to try to reason with someone. I'm just going to bomb them so much that they'll just want to talk to me. Okay, I mean, maybe that works sometimes, but you're supposed to be a diplomat, and that's not really right, because he's a secretary of state or foreign secretary. So you would expect something a little better and refined, but unfortunately it's rather lacking. So here's this is just a random clip of Oliver Stone that I found. He seems to be thinking that the Russians are winning. I'll just play it for you.
Into a war situation in this Ukraine, you have so much propaganda especially from the Western side. It's so one-sided that everything becomes an anti-Russian issue. Obviously, they're the stronger country. They're winning the war. They're actually kicking ass, but we don't know that in the West. We have no realization of what's really going on because there's been no military honesty. It's a completely corrupt process in the United States. You have to run everything through the White House because the White House is fighting the war, and they're telling you the Russians are evil, brutal, all this stuff, but it's not fair because we're not getting the truth, and the American people are blind. They're led by like sheep to a conclusion. Once you get into a...
Yeah, I mean, that's one way to put it, certainly. That's certainly one way to put it. Here are some of these videos that they're posting, the Ukrainians. It's a flag raise, so they'll take a village or something, and then they'll get all the soldiers who are knackered to just go put up a flag so they can post it through on the BBC or Sky News or whatever. Yeah, I mean, let me end this video just by saying that this Ukrainian counteroffensive doesn't seem to be, what it's all cracked up to be. I mean, they sent a bunch of drones to attack the Kremlin, and they had this Belgorod incursion. And yes, that might seem funny that you are provoking a nuclear power, but in terms of the front line, it's not moving. It hasn't moved for many months. I mean, this is not doing it. It's not doing it. So these green circles, or shall we say, black and green circles, that's where you have intense fighting. Okay, but you can see that it's mostly. I mean, they're saying here that the biggest one is Kherson. I mean, the whole counteroffensive mostly concentrated in Kherson in any case, but just to show it to you on a map, right? You have this outside Bakhmut over here, but then down when we look south towards Kherson, that's where you have most of the fighting. The claimed Ukrainian counteroffensive in blue, it's nothing. It's like it's barely a few villages, right? So if they've spent months giving all of these tanks and all this tank training to the Ukrainians just for this, I mean, I'd be disappointed. I'd be disappointed if I were Zelensky. I mean, I think I'd be fuming, honestly, if this is it. But again, they will continue tomorrow and the days after, so it's not over. Everything could change tomorrow morning. But as of now, I'm talking to you on June 13th, right? This is towards 10 p.m. this is where it's at. They've taken almost nothing back, and they kept saying it's a spring counteroffensive. I mean, it's a little late for that, but it's just a bunch of tank columns. And keep in mind, these are, the Russians are posting videos of them finding these tanks still on, right? I think it was a Bradley in that video where you had a Russian soldiers like filming how they just taken out a Ukrainian tank, and the engine in the tank was still running. I don't know if it was a Bradley or something else. It doesn't matter. The point was that, like, he's trying to indicate how swiftly and quickly they're dealing with the counteroffensive. Now, obviously, that's just one example. It's anecdotal, but there's so many videos. I couldn't even show them all because it's and of course you have to take them with a pinch of salt. But there's so many, and for what? You have to keep in mind, like, over the past days. You're gonna have you're seeing estimates of 8,000 Ukrainian killed, 8,000 Ukrainian soldiers. You could say the Russians have it the same or roughly the same. Just think of these figures. You have thousands of people dying for a few stretches. I mean, it's abysmal. It's truly abysmal. So right now, what the West is saying about Russia is that they've run out of their tanks, that they're having to go and get some from their old Soviet stock. So the Russians, they have like around 4,000 or 5,000 tanks in storage, and not all of them, but a good chunk are from what you would call the Soviet era or Cold War. And that doesn't mean they're bad. I don't know why they keep saying this, like it means they're bad. And Soviet era could mean anything, frankly. What are we talking about? A T-34, a T-70, which it's a T-72. I mean, the Soviet era could mean anything, right? But in any case, they're saying that the Russians are running out of tanks because Ukraine is blasting them away, that they're going and trying to get some out of the old stock. It's the same thing that they were saying when the drone war kind of escalated. When I say that, I mean warfare inside of Ukraine, not the drone war in Afghanistan, right? or led by the Americans. They were saying back then that Russia can't build drones. They have no more drones, and now they're having to resort to asking Iran. And then it turned out everything Iran was sending was good. I'm not going to see you through this whole BBC clip, but just take a listen to how it's going, right, according to them.
Let's turn our attention to Ukraine. The country has remained tight-lipped about the much-anticipated spring counteroffensive, but today they're claiming some victories. My colleague Yalda Hakim is in Kyiv. Yalda.
Mariam, thank you. And as you say, the Ukrainian side is claiming some victories, although it's still early days. The President Zelensky, told a press conference that I was at a few days ago that the counteroffensive has begun, and we have started to see some developments, although it's still so difficult to get information from the battlefield. But let's just tell you what we know so far. So I'm just going to show you some footage here, which was released earlier today by Ukraine's 35 separate Marine Infantry Brigade. It's described as showing Ukrainian forces recapturing the village of Storozheve. Now, Storozheve is in the Donetsk region in the country's southeast. It's been under Russian occupation for much of the war. Now, it's not far from the settlements of Blahodatne, and you'll remember we've been reporting about Blahodatne just yesterday when they claimed that they had retaken that area, and Neskuchne, as well as Makarivka. These were the first Ukraine said it liberated on Sunday, and we have been keeping our audiences up to date on those in the last 24 hours. Now, footage on social media, which the BBC has not yet verified, shows troops hoisting the Ukrainian flag in the settlements. Kyiv's Deputy Defense Minister said nearby Makarivka was also taken. So some developments there, although, as I said, it's difficult to verify a lot of this. We are getting the information from social media, and our BBC Verify team is working away to try and verify the footage.
Our BBC Verify team. Why are you trying to plug this thing, BBC Verify team? Okay, so the BBC Verify team are trying to verify the footage. What the hell are the rest of you doing? You're journalists, I thought. Aren't you supposed to verify it anyway? I mean, I'm telling you from the beginning, half of this stuff is put out through the defense ministries, right? What does that mean? It's curated. So the Russians are not going to put out a video of their tanks being destroyed, and neither are the Ukrainians, right? And vice versa. So I'm telling you from the beginning, this stuff is curated. Not all of it, but a good chunk of it, okay? Especially the stuff from helicopters and drones. Everything that's in the air, because that's being recorded, and it's not like you have some guy who just, who's on the ground whipping out his phone or whatever. But they're so cringy. They're so cringy at BBC. I'm just complaining about their BBC Verify stuff. I haven't even begun. Let's continue. I promise I won't torture you for too much longer.
Footage that we're getting from the front lines. What we do know is that the pace of things, while we are hearing about the liberation of these villages, according to the Ukrainian forces, it's still early days, and the Russian side is reporting that there are huge casualties on the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainian side is saying the same thing. So we are being cautious about what we're reporting. But joining me now is...
oh my God, she almost became a journalist for like 20 seconds. She started using critical thinking. Oh yes, both sides are going to exaggerate. Yeah, yes. It's a war. We don't know. She almost became one. Not quite, but In any case, I think that these satellite images are fascinating. You can see multiple rows. Multiple lines of defense that the Russians have dug in. Now, it's not the prettiest architecture. It's plain ugly. But you haven't seen anything like this for a long time. And you have to keep in mind, they don't have them every single, it's not the Atlantic Wall or something. It's they've basically done them on the main road. So if there's a main road coming down here, they'll cut that off with the lines of defense I mentioned earlier, right? So they'll because you physically, logistically, you can't build something to encircle every single village and town and city. It'll be crazy, right? It would be crazy. But I'm curious to see how these Western tanks that they've been flogging for so long now, and trying to convince you it's the best thing in the world, how they're going to deal with this, because everything is. That the Russians have built is there. You can't just remove it or imagine that it, pretend it doesn't exist. It's there. These defensive lines. Here, even the BBC were talking about this. Look, so they were showing Crimea. Okay, this is 2 months ago in 2023. It's the same thing I told you, but it's on the beach. I'm not quite sure what they were expecting. Like are they expecting an invasion through the Black Sea or something? But it's not stupid to do it just to be safe, and you can see that whole trench line going down like this, right? And it's the same thing that we looked at all around Kherson and Donbass and so on.